Are you sitting comfortably here? Then we shall begin. Welcome to a very exciting episode of The Good Listening To, Your Life and Times with me, Chris Grimes. And I'm absolutely delighted to bring a lovely, I mean, just take a look at him if you're also watching here on Facebook Live. A lovely man who we've got history, which I'll explain. But this is the lovely Lawrence Nockels, also known as Lol Nockels. And presumably, if he knocks at the door, it's Lolly Knocks. See what I
Hey,
did there?
very good.
Also, you are a wonderful human being. We've got history in that you've been extremely helpful to me with various creative projects over time. But you are the co-founder, which is why I wanted to talk to you, of Mangostone, which is a wonderful company, a creative hub in the centre of Bristol, or the heart of Bristol, as you call it, because I think you're a really good storyteller. You're model and prop makers par excellence. And what I
Try.
loved when I was researching you this morning is you have the expertise and experience to make it happen.
Yes. Yes.
And I will let you speak in a minute, but I'm just going to blow some
Yeah.
smoke at you. I've
Yeah.
certainly experienced your expertise because actually we've got history in that when I first met you, there was someone called Liz Banks out there and her lovely partner Max as well. And they introduced me to you because I was making a short film called Knock Knock. And then you turned up to craft as a sort of prop making design, a very special bespoke front door for me that had to detach and be in two halves. Then subsequently you did something called the old style music hole. You designed a hole for
Forgotten
me,
about that.
which was
Yes.
a lovely,
Yeah.
so here we are, history coming full circle. Welcome to my Zoom hole. But you did a music hole, and it
Yes.
was a lovely sort of cyclorama for a character or two called Turnip and Flange that I did back in the day. And then you also produced me extraordinarily an extra large wheelie bin for another slightly weird comic endeavour I was doing called Stand Trolley.
Yeah.
He was a washed up jokeaholic clown in an extra large wheelie bin. And why he was in a wheelie bin is he could have been a comedy contender. He could have wheelie bin somebody. Hey. Anyway, so Lawrence Nockels. What would you prefer, by the way? I know you as Lol, but
It's a funny one, isn't it? I guess I've been, my friends have been calling me LOL for about 20 odd years. When I first coined that name, and then professionally, I'm still struggling with it. Actually, I sort of, so yeah. I guess professionally, at work-wise, I introduced myself as Lawrence, and then if we become friends, it's LOL. I don't know. It's a strange. I'm
but
not
it's
entirely
such
sure.
a
Call
it's a
me LOL
lovely.
because we're friends, so that's fine.
And it is a name that keeps on giving because also history now winding forward at the beginning of the pandemic, and we've been doing it for 18 months now. You've joined me on the Facebook group, where we're going live actually now, called
Yeah,
#LolVirus. And for
indeed.
those watching, Lol is a co-administrator, and you've been incredibly effusive and incredibly helpful with not just echoing and I suppose amplifying the posts, but you've also been contributing a lot and joining in.
Well, it was lockdown was a bit strange, wasn't it, to say the very least. And it just struck me as a really, really capital idea to do something like that, seeing as we're all stuck at home, just to have something at the very, on one level, just something uplifting that all gives us a bit of a laugh,
A
actually.
sort of Lol on the daily, and here we are, Lol on the daily. Here he is.
And there have been some really great laughs on that page, actually, but also some really uplifting things as well. So it's not just laughs, is it? There's some more, I think you've been particularly good at putting on some really lovely pieces on there. So yeah, no, it's nice. It's jolly nice. It's and it seems to keep going.
And
Um,
indeed, we are doing this we booked this for a second time because I know you've also, in terms of storytelling, which we're going to get on to, but I know you've also had to run the roller coaster of COVID yourself and your family personally as well.
yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yeah. Well, that was quite recent, actually. Towards the end of July, having hidden from this beast for 18 months, it came to visit, and my lovely wife Dee and my two daughters Grace and Lena all got it pretty much around the same time, and I didn't somehow. I don't know how. We all did PCR tests; they were all positive.
Yeah.
I'm negative. So when we spoke last time, I was currently living downstairs
You were.
with the dogs and taking food orders and grocery orders by text for all the patients who were confined into their rooms.
Yes.
And that went on for a good couple of weeks, and it was very strange.
And I hope you're all fully recovered now and all the right way up again. You're looking very well yourself this morning.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no, we're all back to it, so that's great. But it was just, it was a very strange time, I have to admit. But we came through it and we're okay. Came through it just in time to go on holiday to Wales. So, hooray! That was nice.
Lovely stuff. So I'm going to run you through the storytelling, lovely, juicy metaphors of the Good Listening To show. We're going to talk about your clearing, first of all. And as you're such a creative individual, prop making continually, creating magic, I'm going to be very intrigued to know where that is. And then within your clearing, sort of waiting for Godot-esque, I'll arrive with a tree, shake your tree, see which storytelling apples fall out. And then there's the exercise, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, alchemy, gold, cheeky bit of Shakespeare, and a cake, please. So there's lots to play for. Hurrah! So yes, also there'll be a deliberate invitation for you to talk deliberately about Mangostone and where people can find out more about you at the very end.
Okay, great.
And I know that you started Mangostone in 2017, partly because I'd given you lots of experience of prop making myself. And that was with Tony Tarquini, if that's how you spell that.
Tarquini.
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 And I have a fancy of you going to work with him going, hey, Nockels, get over here. Because of the sort of sound of Tarquini, Nockels.
I stopped doing that quite quickly, actually. But, temptation, I have to admit.
Right, let's get on with it. So, just before we start, there's a slightly surprising question, which you weren't expecting. So, how's morale? What's your story of the day? Please, Lawrence Nockels.
Oh, gosh, I wasn't expecting that. How is morale? What's my story of the day? I think Pastures New is my story of the day. Actually, I came back from our holiday in Wales to an extremely busy workshop and quite a tight deadline on a little job that we were doing for Urban Animations. And so everything had to be put to one side to get that over the line, which we did on Monday, actually. So we had yesterday to recover, clean the workshop up, and now we're looking at new things. So it's a constant roller coaster, this kind of making things for other people business. And and so it continues. So
presumably lots of surprises as to what's coming through your door next in terms of your next creative embarkation.
Always surprises. Oh my goodness me. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, which is why we love it so much. I think I probably have a very, very low boredom threshold, and I don't have a chance to ever get bored because I literally, as you say, don't know what's coming through the door next. Sometimes we do, but rarely. Yeah.
And I know that you're incredibly experienced because not just doing the work for me, you've been at Pinewood Studios as well. So you are very immersed within propery throughout the film industry, but also for exhibitions and all that shebang, which you can talk about later as well.
Sure.
Right. Okay, so welcome to The Clearing. This is the great segue now into the structure of the Good Listening To Your Life and Times with me, Chris Grimes. So, Lol Nockels, wonderful human being, what is a clearing like for you? Where do you go, literally or metaphorically, in order to get clutter-free and able to think, please?
Do you know what? I'm undecided, and I remain undecided about it. Actually, I think my initial knee-jerk response to this was, it's my workshop. I've always wanted my own workshop. Now I've got one, I love it. And quite often I will spend a good hour or maybe half an hour at the end of the day just being on my own in that space, tidying up, making sure it's all great. And maybe sometimes just sitting there and absorbing the fact that it's all around me, and that's great. But actually, whilst I'm sat here with you in my lovely garden room, this is a separate kind of clearing, which is, nothing to do with work. This is all to do with fun and family. So I've got two clearings. Is that greedy? I don't know.
No.
But I think for the purposes of this conversation, maybe the workshop is where I spend most of my time. This lovely thing you see behind you is a fairly recent addition. But
there's a lovely sense of presence in that you seem to be happy wherever you are, and you're living the dream because you've actually created then your perfect man cave. It sounds like. Yes, kind of. It's not very much a man cave. It's quite a lady cave at the moment, but that's okay. I don't mind that. I'm surrounded by women in my house. In fact, I am the only man in my house. I have the wife, 2 daughters, and 2 dogs, both of which are also female. So Can I just congratulate you for the expression? Here we are on LOL Virus, lady cave. Thank you very much indeed. And moving on. So I'm about to drive now sorry, back to you. You look like you're about to say something else about.
Well, no, you touched on happiness actually, and that's something I'm probably going to revisit quite a lot over this conversation because that's quite an important thing to me, and I think that's the key to life. And a lot of people sort of maybe think that's a bit of an add-on that comes on afterwards. I think that's probably more of an important thing than most people realise.
It certainly is. And by the way, lovely storytelling so far. Loving this. So do you agree with the sort of metaphorical man cave, as whether that's there or at your Mangostone studio, where I can arrive with a tree now waiting for Godot-esque to shake your stories? Yeah. So I'm arriving at the opening of your man cave as opposed to your lady cave. I'm not going to say that anymore. So I'm at the entrance to your man cave. I'm going to shake your tree now, and this is where your storytelling apples fall out. Okay. And you were kind enough to have prepared, before we spoke, this is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise. Yeah. We've had 5 minutes to have thought about 4 things that have shaped you, 3 things that inspire you, two things that never fail to grab your attention, and I quite enjoy at this point saying, "Oh, squirrels," borrowed from the film Up. This is two things that never fail to grab your attention as the monsters of distraction that operate around us all, and then a quirky or unusual fact about you. So don't panic, Mr. Manring, you don't have to shake the tree in a wanna, but it's over to you now to shake your foliage in the canopy of your tree.
Gosh, that's quite. It's a really. I don't know how you arrive at this list of questions, but but they're quite interesting and they do provoke thought, actually. And yeah, I guess the first one. I think the first one. Things that have shaped me. Being an only child, I think, has shaped me quite a lot. That's not something that's I think the only child thing, I really thoroughly enjoyed being an only child, actually. I think a lot of people go, "Oh, we're an only child." But actually, no, I really enjoyed it. Didn't have to share my Christmas presents. As far as I could tell, most of my friends were constantly warring with their siblings. Never really had any of that. I had a very calm kind of upbringing in South London with mum and dad, and it was great. But I think, yeah, being an only child, I don't know how that shaped me, but it must have done, I suppose.
And what do both your parents, are they still with us, and what did they do? What do
Sadly,
they do?
My dad died quite some time ago. I was in 1991. I was in my early 20s, and mum died about three or four years ago. So, but they both worked from home at the time. I had a very happy childhood growing up in South London. My folks were both illustrators, so I grew up in a creative household. My dad had a studio at home, and he was at home the whole time illustrating natural history books mostly. He did also do oil portraits of people and sometimes their animals as well.
So you had an early formative experience within a sort of studio environment, a workshop
Very
environment.
much. Yeah. I grew up drawing and painting. Absolutely. Yeah, that's what I did as a child. And as an only child, that's what I would do. I had sketchbooks that go back years.
Yes.
Yeah, and making little things, making little models.
Yes.
Drawing, painting. I'd have a little chair next to Dad at his desk. That's what I did.
And by the way, it is an astonishing array and gallery of property you have made. Obviously, we're going to invite people to look at the Mangostone website later on, but it's really, really inspiring. I mean, you inspired me directly, but of course now you do that on an epic scale. I know. So yeah, back to you. Happy being an only child. Yep.
Very happy being an only child, very happy upbringing. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and I've sort of tripped into the other one, which is having creative parents. And I think that was that's obviously been quite formative for me, actually. I've never really had the inspiration to sort of go and get a job and work for someone for the rest of your life, which no longer happens, but did probably in those days in the 70s. Yeah, it's maybe seems to have given me a little bit of a wider horizon than some of my contemporaries.
Yes, with the idea of a freelancer's muscle to flex, because it's scary for many because it's swimming away from the reef till it gets really cold, whereas actually there's great courage in swimming out from the reef, and then the world is much bigger, as being the world is your oyster.
Yeah, but I have to say that took me quite a long time to discover that, actually, because interestingly, both my parents actively campaigned for me not to be creative as a profession. They were illustrators, as I said. They worked from home. They were always in work, but I think in the early days of my dad's career, he was in advertising. He was one of the original madmen in the late 50s, early 60s in London, and he sort of got out of that game because he really wanted to be an artist and to paint and be an illustrator. One of his friends had a publishing company and employed him pretty much constantly after that. But I think there was a little bit of regret in that step, because although he really thoroughly enjoyed his work, a lot of his friends who remained in advertising ended up being extremely successful financially.
Yeah.
And of course he didn't, because he was an illustrator. And so I think they were very much of the mind, hey, Lawrence, what you need to do is, this is great and everything and makes you very happy, but why don't you go and earn some money, get a proper job, don't go to art college at all, go and get a job in sales or estate agent or whatever you can do.
Yeah. So they got slightly scorched with the creative endeavour, so they wanted to protect you from that.
I think yeah, exactly. And it was only really after my father died in sort of the early 90s when it dawned on me, actually, that the important thing in this life actually is to be happy and enjoy what you do for a living. Having done a number of years in various kind of sales related jobs and not really enjoyed them very much. And I thought, I began to learn something about myself, which is if I don't enjoy what I'm doing, I'm actually rubbish at it. And I need to enjoy what I'm doing on a daily basis. Otherwise, I just lose interest.
By the way, a creative endeavour quote I heard recently, which could be familiar to many, but it's in any creative endeavour, the quote is, writing a book of poetry is like dropping a rose petal into the Grand Canyon and awaiting an echo.
Yeah.
So it is a risk to be creative, but sometimes it can absolutely come back with, hey, rose petals akimbo.
It is, and it was, I didn't have any plan, actually. I just went to, it was interesting because it was after my father died. It was a real blow, obviously, because there was just the three of us. There was me and mum at home, and dad was no longer there, and I was in my early 20s, 22.
And how old was your father, if you don't mind me asking?
He was 76. So he was quite, he was, my parents were older than a lot of people my age. So I was born in 1967. Dad was 52, which is only, a year or so older than I am, younger than I am now. I can't imagine having a new child at this age.
Yes.
To be honest, I think I was probably a bit of a surprise.
Hello. And we're very happy you're here.
And so where was I going with that? And it sort of I went off to Canada. I went traveling. I had a friend of mine who was in Canada said, hey, look, you're having a really shit time, why don't you come out over to Canada? And I'm in Whistler, which is this ski resort in
yes, I know.
in Bristol. Beautiful place. And I went over there and I skied, or learned to ski, and I got a job as a cleaner, just to sort of fund my way through doing that. And it was a bit of a strange path into art college, because I was, how shall I put this? I was in Canada on a tourist visa and I was working.
Okay.
Back in the days when you could do. World
exclusive.
This lady I was sort of running the night crew of this cleaning company doing bars and restaurants in Whistler, and this lady really wanted actually me to work for her properly. So she said, we need to get you a work visa. And the way to do it was to come back to the UK, enroll on a course to be a student, come back on a student work visa for 6 months, and then she would sponsor me, and that's what I would do. That was my plan. And so I got onto the only course that I could in those days, which was a foundation art course at Bower Ashton, having no intention at all of attending the course. It was purely a mechanism for getting me student work visa in Canada. So
and was it a profoundly brilliant course that changed your life by that happy coincidence?
As it turned out, yes, it was.
Wow.
So we tried to get the extension of the work visa and all of it, and that didn't happen. So I came, So plan B, come back, go to art college. And it was amazing. It was brilliant. I absolutely loved it. I did this foundation course, and it was just incredible. Absolutely loved it. And I thought, okay, well, I'm here doing this foundation course. Let's go and do the degree thing. But I'd like something I can earn a living at. I'd like a job. I was thinking maybe graphic design or something like that. And my tutors were sort of shoving me towards fine art because, clearly, sculpture, everything. I was thinking, no, I want a job. I want a job. I don't want to be a sculptor. How on earth will I make a living? And I eventually found this degree course, which had come from Dartington. It was in Bower Ashton, and it was called Art in Social Context. And it was a fine art based course. But because it was in social context, it needed a reason. I had a slight problem with the whole fine art thing at the time, which, I didn't really, a lot of it I thought was a bit wayward, a tiny bit up itself, possibly, art for art's sake, etc. And I thought, well, giving something a context was great. Yeah. And I did sort of a lot of site-specific sculpture. I seem to remember sort of aping Andy Goldsworthy all around Ashton Court for a number of years.
But how did you get from Canada and being from London to Bristol? Was it Bower Ashton that brought you to Bristol?
No. My folks moved down from London to Bristol when I was about 14.
Fine.
Completely aside of that, we'd always holidayed in the West Country, and illustrators, they could work anywhere. And they eventually took the plunge when I was 14, which I was really cross about, actually, because
that's a very good shaping thing as well, isn't it? About when our parents make choices to move. When I haven't even got going here, and you're moving.
Yes. I'm in South London, and we go to. Well, it wasn't even Bristol actually. It was Chew Valley, south of Bristol. We moved to Ubly, which is beautiful, but not somewhere a 14-year-old wants to live particularly.
Did you say Ubly?
Ubly.
Yes, my previous agent was based in Ubly. Excellent.
It's a lovely spot.
Ubly is a lovely, jubbly.
Not somewhere that a 14-year-old from South London is particularly pleased to be.
Shall we say? Yes.
Shall we say? So that's what took me there. But anyway, yeah.
So back to your tree. We're in there shaking it away. You're doing lovely stuff, by the way.
So this course, Art Social Context, the great thing about it, and the reason I chose it was because it had a work experience slot. And I thought, okay, well, let's see what work experience I can get. And there was a company, still is a company in Bristol called Codsteaks, who at the time made all the sets, props and models for Arvin Animations. They were at those days right next door. And I got a 2-week work experience slot with them, and round peg in a round hole. And I went back to, I was working for them before I graduated, in fact. And the rest is history. You know, I couldn't believe that was a job. They're paying me to make little sets, props and models for the likes of Wallace and Gromit, etc., etc.
I love that. I love that expression you used about round peg, round hole. So your soul was chiming, I have found my purpose, which could indeed get onto Alchemy and Gold later on when we get there.
Well, yes. I mean, I think the thing that I was struggling with at art school was the fact that it's an awfully long journey, and an inward journey, I think, to sort of to be a fine artist, to discover something within yourself that you feel strongly and passionately enough about to create art. And I didn't really have that in me at the time. I just found it a huge relief and much easier to respond to someone else's brief. A lot of the time it might not be a resolved drawing, it might be an idea or something, you know, and say, can you help me achieve this? And then I sort of, you know, the enjoyable bit is taking that, running with it, making it your own during that process. And
by the way, that's very exciting as a description of your process. I mean, I do remember coming to you with that extraordinary, you know, this is just one example, but when I came to you, I need an extra large monolithic sort of 10-foot wheelie bin. And you went off and you did it. And of course, I don't think there's probably never, ever been one made ever before of that scale.
I often wonder what's happened to it, actually.
Well, I think didn't you arrange for some puppet company to take it off me?
It was, yeah. So it was stored at a place called Scary Cat. My good friends Gary and Kat, who had a company called Scary Cat, who were in Paintworks for many, many years. They're still going, but they've moved out down to Somerset now, and they stored that for a number of years because we thought that's got to be useful for something.
Somebody's going to need an extra large wheelie bin. In fact, we can probably do a big shout out. If anyone knows where that bin is, get in touch, because it used to
absolutely,
be maybe a slightly weird character called Stan Trolley. Awkward.
Yeah, maybe
back to you. Sorry.
Yeah. So they stored that for a number of years, and I don't know where it is now. But yeah, exactly. But that's the thing that immediately sort of ignited me about this particular line of work, is the fact that, you know, I don't have to be here generating all these wonderful ideas. There are people out there generating them. They just need help to realize them. And
yes, people with no idea how to make it happen, and that's what you do. Love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't know that immediately, obviously. I spent the first probably 5 years of my professional career doing things that were entirely brand new to me, working with materials I've never worked with before, and so on and so forth. And actually that still happens.
Yes.
You know, people come to me and say, "Oh, can you make this?" I go, "Yeah, sure I can." But you know, you don't.
It's so lovely that.
Have you got an example of something like this you've made before? I've got no.
Never been done before.
Yeah, well, you know, yeah, exactly.
It's lovely, that sort of raison d'etre of make it happen. It's great. And also, I love the fact that your journey, as you said, it's a long journey. Mangostone is only circa 2017 when you finally found your home, if you like.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, lovely. Great stuff.
It was quite a long journey, actually. I mean, I'd been working in Bristol probably since, you know, mid-90s, up to about sort of 2013. And, you know, I was doing set building, model making, prop making in Bristol for various companies, and project managing for various companies. And the whole reason for doing work outside of the film business is that in those days, which doesn't seem that long ago, 2013, but there we are, Bristol was very much, you know, it seemed like a little bit of a small town. It's not London, you know, it's a bit feast and famine, that line of work. So actually, the way to sort of even out those troughs was to look at doing retail displays at Christmas, doing visitor attractions and theme park work, because they have their calendars. You know, Easter's very busy, summer's very busy, and then there's film work that, you know, hopefully you can even all of that out. So I was across all these different areas. But yeah, no, I got this kind of gig up at Pinewood, working on a big Ridley Scott movie, actually, as a sculptor, which was just amazing, grueling.
Was that the Blade Runner 2040?
No, that was it was a movie called Exodus. Exodus, Gods and Kings. So Christian Bale, I believe, is in that. And yeah, I was one of 3 senior sculptors working for an amazing guy called Roland Stevenson, who has got such an incredible list of movies that he's worked on. Absolutely amazing. I mean, he is a sculptor and he's an HOD props guy and just prolific in his work, and also an extremely kind person, actually, I have to say. I got up there, from Bristol, having worked on sort of art animations and small stuff, and then we were in this workshop right in the middle of Pinewood Studios, quite an intimidating environment for someone to turn up to. And as I say, I was only one of only 3 senior sculptors in this department of 30 makers, I think, altogether. Yep. And he said, right, can you make this statue here? It's quite a big thing, and all the rest of it. And I said, yeah, sure. And off I go, and I'm right in the middle of the workshop. I'm feeling quite intimidated by it all. And I think the first day I started putting clay on, I think I put it was a seated sculpture, and I think I've made a foot. So, yes. And I went home with large portions of the fear inside me, and he took me aside the next morning and said, are you okay? You seem a little out of your depth here, and I went, yeah, I am. I just, I'm used to sort of smaller stuff. This is a bit bigger. He said, look, you'll be fine. I've seen your portfolio. You'll be fine. Just throw clay at it. You'll be absolutely fine. And sculpture. And, he was right. He was, that's what I mean by what a kind guy he was. I think a lot of people in his position could have said, get out, I'll get someone else, because it's quite a hard-nosed environment to be in that. But he still found the time to be a little bit nurturing and you know what, you're going to be fine. And thank God I was.
And what's his name again? It's lovely to amplify someone who's been
awesome. Name is Roland Stevenson.
Roland Stevenson, lovely man, wonderful. As indeed are you, by the way, and indeed you are kind as well. What we tend to find attractive in others, we are doing ourselves often. It's called reciprocity, as you know, and sincerely, I am grateful and want to amplify you for being incredibly kind to me on all sorts of creative endeavours. So, right back at you. Back to you.
Well, yeah. So, and then this other sort of job reared its head, which was opening this workshop on behalf of Pinewood Studios, which was a prop making workshop. They came to visit me at a company I was at in Bristol at the time. It was the financial director and the business development guy came down to see us in Bristol. We were very excited. What do Pinewood want us to make? And the answer was nothing, actually. We're Pinewood Studios, they said. They introduced themselves. We rent our space out to film productions. But a number of our tenants are doing quite well, thank you very much, servicing these film productions with various creative services, prop making being one of them. And so we haven't got the expertise for prop making, but we have got the facilities. So we're looking to partner with someone. Would you be interested? And the company I was with at the time, I guess weren't actually. They were, they'd been in Bristol for 20 or 30 years at the time. They were very happy here, thank you very much. And as I say, coincidentally, I got this job at Pinewood, and I bumped into one of these suits that had come and stayed with us, visited us, a bloke called Jeremy Michaels, and he did a bit of a double take. So, wait, why are you here? I thought you worked in it. Well, I'm freelance and slightly tongue-in-cheek. I said, when Ridley Scott phones, I drop everything. So he said, okay, well, look, I haven't heard back from these guys. Maybe you'd be interested in coming on board for, a 3-month consultancy period, 3 days a week, and just, hashing together a bit of a plan for this prop making workshop. And I said, yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, we did that. So that's what I started to do. And then it turned into Pinewood Creative. We presented our plans to the board, and they said, great, go for it. And they gave me this swanky sounding job, head of Pinewood Creative, and gave me what was then the Carpenter's Mill, which is a 30,000 square foot workshop, with about half the budget that I reckoned we needed in order to do what we needed to do. And run with that. And I did that for 3 years, and that was amazing. It was.
So now you've done project management on an epic scale in starting with the foot of a statue.
It was, well, not a little bit of a step up. It was a huge step up from being, running sort of small jobs at a small model making company to being at Pinewood Creative and Pinewood Studios with all the big films and productions that were around at the time. But I think I quite quickly realised that actually, I know just as much about prop making as anyone else there, and so it was okay actually. And it was a very interesting 3 years. It was quite challenging. It was quite intimidating. It was very corporate actually.
And I'm hearing a coming of age of your own confidence. Finally, you go, do you know what? I've got this. I can do this. Yeah,
exactly. And so that's why it got to about 3 years. To be honest, that kind of getting up at 4:30 on a Monday morning and sneaking off out of the house up to that M4 on a Monday morning never got any easier.
Yes, your soul wasn't chiming the nearer you got towards
A
being
lovely
alone.
house and family here in Bristol. I never see them. I've got all this stress and pressure, and I think when I got to the sort of the 3-year mark, I thought, you know what? Actually, I think I need to go home. And
Lovely.
so I did. I just came back, and it was a real shot in the dark. Actually, I just quit Pinewood. The timing was interesting because Pinewood had been just recently bought by an individual who turned it from a PLC back into a private company, and they're property managers. There was always this expectation that we could never really make them enough money.
Yes.
And the job we do is quite costly. You need to employ people, you need to buy a lot of materials, you've got to carve your margin out of every job.
Yeah.
They could actually just sit back, rent this facility to Disney and make more money than we are doing, which is in fact what they're doing. So I kind of saw that coming.
Yeah.
And I quit, and I came back to Bristol, and that's when Tony phoned me up. So Tony and I had worked together for a number of years in Bristol. His background is set building, carpentry, art direction. He took, I would say, he would agree with me to say he took a slight sort of backseat career-wise. In previous years, his wife Holly runs the Bath Film Festival, so she's a very busy lady. He said, "Well, you do the work full time. I'll have my little workshop at home and look after the kids and do the school run." And that's what he did. And now his children are slightly older, so he said to me, "Look, what are you doing? You've quit Pinewood. What are you doing?" And I said, "Yeah, well, I've had enough of that. I want to set something up." And he said, "Well, I'm looking to get back more into do some more work. What are you thinking of?" And I said, "Well, I've got this idea for something called Mangostone." So this is a name that I thought of in 1997 when I was on holiday. I was traveling with my now wife Dee, and we were on a beach in Honduras eating mangoes.
Oh,
and I turned to her and I said,
sorry, I just want to bathe in it. I love that. Honduras eating mangoes with my future wife.
Eating mangoes out of a bag. Actually, they were peeled, cut up in a bag, and I was sucking on this stone. And I said, if ever I have my own workshop, I'm going to call it Mangostone.
Epiphany, Mr. Nockels, right there.
It took me literally 20 years to register that company name. Luckily, no one else had.
And I love the name, by the way. It is absolutely.
Thank you.
Suck on that stone. I love that.
It did pretty well. So he said, "Well, do you want a business partner? Should we do this together?" And I said, "Yeah, that would be great."
Oh, by the way, can I have a Mangostone T-shirt? I really like them.
Of course you can.
Just thought I'd get that live in public. Thank you.
I should be wearing one. Oh, damn.
Oh, no, give me one. I'll wear it. No, they're very nice. So thank you. I got
of course
what I did there. So wonderful storytelling stuff. I've got to manage the time because this is lovely and we're about 11, 12 minutes
Going over,
out.
aren't we?
So it's wonderful if it doesn't matter what's overlapping here, but you're giving me who's inspired, what's inspired, and even being on the beach in Honduras is inspiring. So this is delicious. Don't worry about any overlap. But where would you like to go in your canopy next?
Well, I would like to move on slightly, but there is one other thing that has defined me, which is quite important to talk about, I think, which is dyslexia, which I am. And actually, most of the people I work with, I've noticed, are as well. And I think many of your creatives have been on this previously, and many creative people are, in fact, dyslexic.
That's such an astute observation. That's brilliant. Yes.
It's something that I've noticed over the years.
Yeah.
And it's something that's, when I was at school in London, my folks sent me to private school in London. And I was I've still got my old school reports. You look back through them and you say, yeah, this guy's, his handwriting's all over the place. His spelling's appalling. His maths is rubbish. He must be stupid. And that was, I've got a bit of a thing about being called stupid because I was labelled that at school. In my early years, and my folks were very, very supportive, and they said he's clearly not stupid. And I don't know how this came about, but they when I was probably 8, maybe even slightly younger, they sent me to St Thomas's Hospital in London, who did a series of tests over about a 3-day period, and they came back with the results, which are this young lad is something called dyslexic. We'd never heard of it before, and what is that? It was described as having a poor sequential memory. They also did, interestingly, an IQ test at the time. So I think my IQ at that time was 155.
Good grief, that's up there. Good grief,
So I understand. So we can then go back to school and say, actually, he's not stupid. He's got dyslexia. That's what this is, and he needs a bit of support.
I think it's that Einstein supposition where if you measure a fish for its ability to climb a tree, it's going to feel fairly crap about itself.
In fact, wasn't Einstein also dyslexic?
Well, indeed, yes. let's Google that and find out afterwards. But yes.
So it's a bit of a pet argument of mine.
Yes,
which is,
I love it.
Is oh, is he dyslexic? Oh, that's a shame. No, it isn't a shame. Actually, it's a gift. It needs embracing, and different, and dyslexia is an absolute gift because, just because I'm a fish and I can't climb a tree doesn't mean I'm a rubbish fish. Just means I'm a fish. So it means
or
that
a fish out of water,
doing other things, and that's kind of the thing I feel that education gets missed a lot of the time.
Yeah.
To not go on too much of a rant about it, but I think the job of education should be everyone's good at something. The job of education should be to find that thing and develop that person in that direction, rather than this continual standard sort of.
Yes, and there is that perpetual societal struggle about who's measuring what and what's the system you're measuring against. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not going to bang the drum about that anymore. But I think that's quite an important part of
well banged.
Things that shape me, basically. Early labels of being stupid, then suddenly realizing in quite an early age that I wasn't, and there's a reason for that. It's this other thing here, and actually that's a strength, not a weakness, even though it is seen as that a lot of the time.
Lovely. Thank you for banging that particular drum. That was a delicious reveal. Thank you. Okay, you might have inferred some of this because you've amplified particular individuals that have helped you. But 3 things that have inspired you.
Gosh, 3 things that inspire me. That have inspired me, or that contend to. Yeah, I suppose I'm always inspired by art and sculpture and beauty and music and kindness. And kindness.
Yes.
In the way that Roland showed me, not that many years ago, but that sort of, it's often seen as a weakness, but I don't think it is.
Oh gosh, no, I think it's one of the most profound. It's people appreciate it. It's not underrated, but I think kindness is, a delicious quality. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Those are my life inspirations for sure.
And then 2 things that never fail to grab your attention. You've said art, so if there's overlap, it's fine. But what 2 things that never fail to squirrels?
Yeah, I'm always a bit like that. So I had this fantastic office manager when I was at Pinewood, a lady called Vicky Joy. She had a particular way about her, and she said that I suffered from ADOS. And I said, "What's that?" And she went, "Attention deficit. Ooh, shiny." I was always getting distracted. I
love that. That's a brand new label. ADOS, attention deficit. Oh, shiny, which is another great world exclusive.
Exactly, but sometimes the shiny things come around. They just they're
like your Mangostone came back 20 years later.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, very much so. Yes.
So if I may suck on that as a sort of your Mangostone, lovely. And then a quirky or unusual fact about you, lol Nockels, we couldn't possibly know until you tell us.
Gosh, no, that's a really interesting one. The quirky, unusual fact I've chosen to reveal today, Mr. Grimes, is that I went for a job at Buckingham Palace as a trainee footman.
Ooh!
Back in 1987? Yeah, no, 86. I was 19. I was at home, I was unemployed, I was getting under my parents' feet. My mum read this article in The Guardian saying, "Oh, look, Buckingham Palace, they can't get anyone to work there. Why don't you get yourself up there and go for a job?" So I did. And what a weird experience that was.
Yes. We need to do a whole other episode about that. Actually,
you really do.
That's
I've got a whole story about that.
By the way, you're being absolutely wonderful, and indeed there is, it could. Well, I think I'm going to ask you back for a second time because I know this is really juicy. So I would like to ask you more about that, but let's leave that hanging there.
Okay, let's do that.
Lovely. Okay, now we move away from the tree and we talk about alchemy and gold. When you are at purpose and in flow, lol Nockels, what are you most happy doing and what are you here to reveal to the world?
I am most happy making things with my hands. Mostly in clay, actually. That's something that I rediscovered when I was working with lovely Roland up in Pinewood. Sculpting clay is something that I absolutely adore. And if I could do that all day long, every day, that's what I would do. It's gorgeous.
Deliberately pausing there to let that hang as a great reveal.
I mean, unfortunately, I don't get to do that a lot these days because, being a company director at Mangostone, and Tony finds exactly the same thing, we are both hands-on guys. And that's one of the great things about, coming back from Pinewood, sort of having something a bit smaller, you can get your hands on these things. But actually, if you're doing sculpture particularly, you just need to kind of zone in.
Yes.
And do that one thing all day long. And you can't have the phone ringing and you can't have quotes that need doing and who's going to do this next job. You can't have those thoughts in your mind. You just need to do that.
Yes, and so many professions suffer from that. I just want to do the teaching, or I just want to do the sculpting. Why can't I be creative? So yes, it's a struggle to be creative. It is.
Very much, because there's all this other noise and all this other stuff that needs dealing with. And so
yes,
it's rare that I get the chance to do that, although I still do occasionally. A little job will come in that I think, I can do that by myself. And Tony will say, he will say exactly the same thing. This job's coming. He said, I fancy doing that. I said, oh, that's great. You do it, And
well, there's a lovely moment there of just a very brief upstaging when you had a dog go behind you and back out again. So that was a lovely bit of upstaging by the pooch. I love that.
Which one was that? Was that Gwen, the little one? Yes, she's.
Well, it was. I was trying to work out what breed it was, but it was. Yes. So, what did you say? Was that? Who did you say? The name of the whippet?
Gwen.
Gwen the whippet.
Gwen the whippet. We have two whippets. We have Margot, who's 8, and Gwen, who is 6 months, and they're gorgeous. That's Margot.
Hello, Margot. Lovely distraction. And now we award you with a cake. So this is going to go splotch in your face in a minute. And you get to put a cherry on the cake. And this is the legacy of the conversation. And again, this is another multi-layered cake and an invitation to go deep. So what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given? A leadership quote that's always given you succor and pulled you towards your future. And finally, inspired by Shakespeare, all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players. When all is said and done, Lol Nockels, how would you most like to be remembered?
Oh, you're so good at that, Chris.
Thank you.
Best advice. I've been struggling with that actually, and I think I go back to my father-in-law's speech at our wedding. So we got married in France, my lovely Dee and myself, and I'm being distracted again. Look, let's whip it. Here she is. This is Gwen.
Oh, yeah.
And he gave this absolutely inspirational speech. It was bloody marvellous. And what was it? There's no friend like an old friend was one of the lines that he used, which I think is a really good one. Yes. And he said, you can never spend too much time with your family, which, was something that I remembered when I decided to come back to Bristol.
Yes.
So there's a couple there. Advice to my younger self, gosh, I think it would be listen to that inner voice. It's quite difficult not to hear that, isn't it?
Ooh, I like you. You're incredibly wise. There's seismic awesomeness to what you're doing. I love that.
Definitely listen to your inner voice. And if I am speaking to myself, knowing myself as I do, I would advise myself to be less of a people pleaser. I am a bit.
Boom. Because you're kind and you're lovely.
Well, sure. But, you combine the two. Less of a people pleaser, unless this inner voice of yours is telling you that's the way to go.
And now, how would you most like to be remembered?
I'm going to stick with kindness. I think if I'm remembered as a kind person, then I think that's great.
If I may, that's sort of in the bag, I would say.
You think?
Awesome. Also, I know you've mentioned Dee. There's a bit of a buy one, get one free, because I'm going to obviously bring Dee, your lovely partner, Dee Riding, into the space at some point too.
I do hope so. She'll be excellent.
And indeed, you have been too. You've been a joy to talk to. Where can we find out more about Lol Nockels, Lawrence Nockels and Mangostone on the interweb, please?
Well, you can Google www.mangostone.org and see all the lovely work that we're doing. We can't show everything. Actually, because a lot of it's top secret, film work and all the rest of it. But it's a really great company, and Tony and I have just set the place up to be the sort of place that we would like to work in. So there we are. That's what it is.
Tony Tarquini, Lawrence Nockels, it's all good. Yeah. So thank you so much for gracing us with your presence here in the Good Listening to Your Life and Times with me, Chris Grimes. As this is your moment in the sunshine, is there anything else you'd like to say about being here?
There's one thing I would like to tell you about, which is happening quite soon, which kind of goes back to the whole kindness thing. So I was approached by, how long have we got, by the way? I'm not going to.
We've got about a minute and a half, 2 minutes. So that's if you use that time well, it's a long time.
I was approached by an artist lady who's since become a very good friend of mine, a lady called Helen Wilson Rowe, who was doing a series
Helen Wilson
Rowe. She was doing a piece of work about a lady called Henrietta Lacks, who not many people have heard of. So Henrietta Lacks was an African-American lady who died in Baltimore in 1951 from cervical cancer. The Johns Hopkins Hospital retained some of her cells, which was common practice in those days, probably still is, for research. And they discovered that her cells had the unique ability to regenerate themselves in a petri dish. which makes them invaluable for research. This has never happened before in the history of humankind or since. They are known as HeLa cells, and they are in every medical lab across the world. And they have been used to develop most of the vaccines across the world. And Helen's body of work is culminating next month in Bristol, because she is about to install the first public sculpture made by a black British woman in the UK of Henrietta Lacks, and it's going into Bristol University the first part of, I think it's the first week of October. And
Wow.
It's come full circle. She came to me 10 years ago for this little piece of work that she wanted to do up in the Science Museum.
Yeah.
The company I was working for at the time weren't interested because there was no money in it, but I said, this has to be done. This is great.
Yes.
I'm just going to do it. Can I just borrow the workshop in the evenings? And that's what we did. And we put it in. And 10 years later, her work has sort of gone on and on and on and on and on. And yeah, she's managed to, she's a painter, not a sculptor, I have to say. So she came into the Mangostone workshop and was schooled by our resident talented sculptor man, a guy called Matthew Healy.
Yes, who I've also seen the wonderful work of during the pandemic, actually. Anyway, I have to get us out of here fairly soon, but
that's in a nutshell. So the kindness thing, supporting this lady in her early work, has ended up just, you know, helping her to
play it forward. Reciprocity, lovely qualities,
and absolutely kindness. So you never know where these things are going to go. So it's the kindest thing, but with the little voice, tells you whether that's the right direction to go in or not.
So relatable because of the comedy improvisational mindset I like of yes and, just say yes more and positive things happen.
Yes.
Lol, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence here in the Good Listening To show and Your Life and Times with me, Chris Grimes. It's also been live on Facebook as a bit of an experiment within the hashtag LOLvirus group. So any listeners, do check out that as well. Thank you very much indeed, and good night.
See you next time.